Thank you, ma'am. All right. Okay. So yeah, in that sort of last bit there, in the spirit of that, had an awesome night last night, meeting with about 20 folks from the community over at City Hall in Bloomington-Normal. And one of the things I learned was that there is a plan here that you guys have that matches high school students with community college and graduates them in the same 4-year period with an associate's degree. Nothing that we do in Kansas City is completely unique with the exception of our data analysis platform. And so by virtue of this trip here, thank you, McLean County. We're stealing something from you, and it will be part of the Kansas City landscape here within a couple of months. I guarantee you that's about going to happen. The other thing, quite frankly, that I guess I'd start with is that Mayor James, our mayor, had asked at one point for the opportunity to come up here and talk to you all. He ended up having to go and do some stuff for Mayor Bloomberg, so he said, Bob, you're up, go forth and do great things. I said, okay, boss, we got this. He said, whatever you do, remind folks 3 things. That number 1, the most important people in government are people in city and county government, because there is not another entity that actual human beings talk to their representatives than at the local level. It is incredibly easy for a legislator at the state or the national level to disassociate themselves from the team from whence they came. Because quite frankly, all their offices are someplace else. They spend most of their time down there. And what becomes the focus of the day-to-day activity is not what happens when a policy gets enacted, but the policy development process itself. It's all about the sausage making. When we screw something up at the city level or the county level, and we are busily shopping for rutabagas that we're going to serve for dinner that night, someone in the grocery store is going to notice us. And there isn't any citizen who isn't going to yell at that mayor or yell at that city council member or fetch at whoever that city official is that they're screwing up. So there is a level of interaction here that makes you guys the most important group in the planet. And I will tell you, I am blown away by what I'm seeing in McLean County. And I look forward to partnering with you guys. And I think there's a lot of stuff that we can do collaboratively. I'm going to tell a very, very, very short story about what our Smart City projects look like. It's going to focus primarily on why we did it, as opposed to what the stuff is. But we'll have to talk a little bit about what the stuff is just to provide relevance. And then we'll talk a little bit about where it is I think we can probably partner and learn from each other and do great things together. So with that, if we could hit the next slide. This is the 54 smartest blocks in the entire United States of America. And it was something of a fortunate accident when it occurred. That little green line or blue line you see smack in the middle of the chart is a streetcar line. And in the year 2011, we were putting in a 2.2 mile streetcar line as a engine, pun intended, to build economic development in the heart of our downtown. We had 4 disparate neighborhoods. At the north end, River Market, which was where Kansas City started in the first place, and at the south end, Union Station, where if you were a World War I soldier west of the Mississippi River, that's where you were inducted into the United States Army and sent off to your training, and from thence to Europe and other places. Completely different cultures in 4 different neighborhoods along that 2.2 mile stretch. We figured that by putting a streetcar there and making it free, someone who's working at the south end of that district just might go up to the fresh produce and the cool restaurants at the north end if we could make it easy from a parking perspective and if we could make it easy from a scheduling perspective. Along the way, we realized that we honked off the better part of about 22,000 people who live along that line because we ripped up the streets, we put in a brand new electrical system, we put in generators, we put in lines. We did enough to disrupt lives at that point that it was no longer good enough to just put in a streetcar line. We were very fortunate at that time that Cisco came to us and said, hey, we've got this crazy idea that we would like to smartify an entire city. And if you would let us take advantage of that big hole in the ground that you've got, and you put in the fiber, and you manage the fiber, and you give us a chance to take advantage of that, we'd like to test if we could make a small cell focused, data-driven system work in a community. And if it does work, we'd like to sell it to other cities. And oh, by the way, we will get somebody else to pay for it. Well, that last magical bit sealed the deal. It also made it a lot more palatable for the business owners who lived along that green and blue line. Because now, instead of just ripping up their lives and putting a disruption and great amount of stress on their business and destroying their street side parking and yada, 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 now it's, dudes, you are living on the smartest public transit corridor in the entire planet as of this moment. And they were all like, okay, cool, we can live with that. We'll give you 18 months to get this thing together. We opened on the 16th of May, and as of today, these 54 contiguous blocks of Wi-Fi is the largest single Wi-Fi space in North America where someone can come in and log on. It's powered by 328 small cells. At the time, the small cells were a little bit larger than they are today, but absolutely they are the foundation for what will eventually be the 5G network. A lot of the innovations that you're doing here in McLean County with regard to autonomous vehicles will eventually run on data being driven by those small cells. I have 178 traffic sensors embedded into my streetlights in this district. We stole that idea from San Diego, California. We let the lights actually adjust their wattage depending on how many people are underneath the light itself, and then we save money on the back end with our public utility by using less electricity at about 3 o'clock in the morning when there's nobody walking our streets. Because much like McLean County, we pretty much roll the sidewalks about midnight every night. That's kind of the way things go even downtown. So that's how we started to roll that into it. We realized we need to actually pay for this stuff. Because over the long term, you have to do maintenance, you have to do life cycle replacement. And we realized that we had to figure out a way to do that because there was no money in the budget to do it. So we installed 25 kiosks, and we put on those 25 kiosks city information. About 50% of that content is, this is where you go to register to vote. This is how you register your dog that you just got from the SPCA shop. This is where you go to file a 311 complaint. And if you want to do it on this 7-foot-tall iPhone, which sits in the middle of the street, you can do it here too. This is where we report on how our city departments are performing. All of that stuff flops up there when we have an arts festival, when we have different things happening in our community. The other 50% of that stuff, though, is advertising, and we sell it. And quite frankly, we, the city, don't get engaged in that conversation because legally, that would be hard. So we sold that opportunity off to Smart City Media. They go out and they get the advertising. We get 50% of the revenue because we bought the machines. And now we've raised $138,000 over the course of the first year that allows us to pay for maintenance on all of those Wi-Fi access points and all of the sensors and all the street lights and all that sort of thing. So that's allowed us to actually sustain this entire network. And every single thing in this network we ripped off of somebody else in terms of ideas. The only thing we did that was different was instead of distributing it throughout the city, kind of like a seasoning salt across a brisket or something, was we concentrated everything on one 54-block area to see what the cumulative effect would be. And then we added one more spice. Get the next slide, please. And that was our data platform. What you see here is all of the data from our sensors gets concentrated in that block that says CDP. And from that block, it goes to two places. The one on the bottom is to a developer lab that's maintained by Cisco. It is physically present in Kansas City on our main street. And if you are an entrepreneur with a really awesome idea and you would like to use data to help validate or invalidate that idea to make a business model, the guys down at Think Big Labs will give you a seat at a co-working space, let you work through it, provide you with some access to some attorneys over a short period of time, and figure out that business case will actually be a company that you want to start up. And then they'll link you up with the guys at a couple of our co-working spaces to get that startup location and to do what you need to do. Awesome. They also add some of their simulated sensors. So they can figure out what type of data will be available if your business case requires something that doesn't exist today. And they're able to simulate that, provide that into the sauce, and that all can happen in a physical location. If, however, you are a junior at Illinois State University and you are absolutely brilliant and you decided that you figured out how to do things better than Mark Zuckerberg did in his little dorm room in Harvard, you can do that because Harvard will give you a VPN access to, or Cisco will give you VPN access to that same data set, and you can work on that in your dorm room right here in Bloomington-Normal. It's possible, and they're doing it right now. The other block up at the top there is a city platform, and this is where we figured out how we could actually operationalize this in our community. We figured out that it wasn't enough to have sensors. Sensors are cool, they make pretty pictures. I've got a couple of websites I'll flash up here in a little bit. And Suze, please share this with everybody, that's cool. You can go to them and you can see the little blinking lights where all my traffic is. You can see where the connectivity levels are, the different streets, and what people are able to do on the internet in terms of broadband connectivity in my community. It's all right there. You can play with it today. But I don't actually get to make a decision with it. And that's the key that we added to this whole smart city sort of world was, we didn't care what the sensors did. We were focused more on people problems. We had to figure out what was it that the mayor needed to focus on to achieve and what processes could we make more efficient that would eventually save us money. Because that's how we would eventually pay for all these innovations. That's how we would pay for the development work on all this software. We started with potholes, so now in Kansas City we predict potholes. It takes city provided data about what's happening with the streets and all the capabilities of those streets. Some vendors are better than other vendors. We know that. We've got the records. And so we know who designed which streets and where they're located. We know what the weather is because we have an airport, just like you guys. And because we have an airport, we have access to very high fidelity weather data down to the block level. When you combine that with what's happening on your street health, you now know where your high risk zones are for potholes. When you add the third element to that, which is that sensor data, and you can figure out which types of vehicles, because 18-wheelers do a whole lot more damage than my little Volkswagen Bug. You can add that with the volume of traffic, and you combine all of those three things with about 18 other variables, you get to the point where you will predict where potholes will form 77 days after a freeze-thaw cycle. Because that break in the road network, that collapse of the asphalt, does not happen in 2 months. It's 77 days. We've done the math, we know it's true. And so now we're able to improve by 40% the efficacy of a street maintenance budget, which right now is about 6 years in arrears. It's going to take me 6 years to the point where I'm actually doubling the money available to my departments. But for the first time in about 15 years, I'm not running a deficit in the street maintenance department because we figured out how to use the data. Now we're expanding it to crime, we're expanding it to public health, we're using predictive analytics to make our city better. And actually focus on that top block, which is allowing my mayor to answer the question, am I doing the right things? We've moved beyond measures of performance. Are we doing things right? And we move to the point where we can actually figure out and provide to our council an assessment of if a policy is going to work or if it isn't, with a better margin for error and a better assessment level than the three subject matter experts who always show up to every single city council meeting, say the exact same anecdote, and they just twist the way it's interpreted. So that's what we're doing right now. Next slide, please. This is our living lab itself. The reason I put this slide in here, quite frankly, was just to give you the link to it. So if you've got some really awesome students, and I know that you have 3 universities here that are represented that are just producing 26,000 graduates a year. I mean, the talent pipeline in a city and a county of this size is freaking amazing. That's where you can send them. Let them do great things. Next slide. We're doing okay. We figured out that about 16 times the population of my city have engaged on our Wi-Fi networks. We have about a 28% accessing rate of people who are given the opportunity to jump onto our Wi-Fi, which is about 10% better than most of your coffee shops will find. So we're very, very, very pleased with the way this is going. And one of the really crazy cultural things we're finding is people don't mind jumping on a city network. And historically speaking, people trust companies more than they trust us. So this has been kind of a really cool experience for us because it's allowing us to have more conversations now, and people are telling us what types of innovations we need next and where we need to focus our efforts next. So that's kind of the way things are working. We also know that it's having the desired economic impact. We had hoped for $500 million of development through our transit corridor where we built our streetcar line. We had hoped for that to occur in about the 10-year mark in terms of property values and some of the things happening. Instead, we're at $2.3 billion and growing as of right now. So this stuff actually does drive development. And it drives it more effectively when it's combining multiple neighborhoods, or in y'all's case, multiple communities, which could really actually do a really cool thing. Next slide. Yes, things have worked out pretty good for us, and we've got the paperwork to prove it. Next. This is where the digital dashboards exist today. One of the things we did in Kansas City was we knew there would be questions about, is my data secure? Is my privacy being respected? That is a very healthy skepticism that, quite frankly, we embraced to the point of passing a privacy resolution 6 months before we turned on our first sensor. And in that privacy resolution, we issued everyone who shows up in Kansas City a data bill of rights. And the big 3 elements of it are, number 1, if the assessment team and the data team in Kansas City is going to ask for data, we have to make sure we ask the city council, Mother May I, before we do it in the very public forum of the weekly council meeting. So everyone knows before we start collecting it, and they get 30 days to yell at me and tell me why it's a bad idea before we start the collection. Second thing we promise is that everything that we put into that gunculator of our assessment engine will be anonymized and aggregated at about the block level. So I will never, ever, ever know what my next door neighbor is doing. But I will know how the block is functioning. And because of that, I will be able to allocate city services at that block level. And I'll tell you, that's probably effective enough. Because if we get into a neighborhood and there is a specific requirement on that block, and we show up with services before a bad situation becomes a crisis, there are good neighbors in that community, and we trust that people are generally good, that will guide us to the right house so we give the right services. That person's privacy is now protected, but they get the services they need, and the community itself understands that we are not looking for a person. We're trying to solve a people problem in general, and we're looking for help to solve the thing. And then finally, we release that data back, and that's what it looks like. This particular slide shows you on the different colored lines there what the broadband speed is. This actually changed the way we do digital inclusion in Kansas City. Before this, we were like every other city in the United States that said digital inclusion or digital divide is real. And everyone nodded their head sagely. Yes, yes, it's real. Got it. And we have to make sure we get the internet to everybody. And everyone nodded their heads sagely. Yes, yes, we do. And we need to do this with broadband because people are moving at faster speeds. And everyone said, yes, yes, we do. And so we were fortunate in Kansas City that in 2011, Google Fiber showed up. And AT&T, not to be undone, also showed up. Spectrum, not to be outdone, also showed up. And at the end of about a 4-year period, I had 8 million strand miles of fiber in our metropolitan space, which was awesome. The idea that we were not digitally connected was pretty much run over at that point. There was no digital divide because 97% of my addresses have broadband available in the housing unit or at the driveway. But that was also dead wrong. I have a serious digital divide problem because the internet is not relevant to about 37% of my residents. They don't see a reason to engage with the internet. They don't trust that the city is going to give them a service which will actually be sustainable over a long term. There is a cost problem associated with broadband connectivity which makes it inaccessible. So this graphic alone changed the way we look at digital inclusion. It ain't about the fiber. For us, it's about education. It's about training. It's about working with HUD to develop with low-cost alternatives to providing that service to residents in public housing units. It's about working collaboratively with our schools so that the Chromebook that gets issued to a kid actually has an opportunity to connect to their homework when they go home at night. This is why we figured out that it wasn't enough just to have the broadband. I needed Wi-Fi. And as we expand our Smart Cities program into the rest of our community, I'm not focusing on this piece. It's done. Check the block and move on with life. What I'm focusing on is how do I put a Wi-Fi and a wireless network here so kid X can sit next to their window and do homework at home, where maybe mom can actually assist with that process. So that's the power of giving that data back and putting it on a dashboard, because none of those ideas came out of City Hall. It came out of other people looking at that screen and saying, Bob, you idiot, you missed the problem. This looks like you solved it, but you haven't solved anything. All you've done is change the nature of the problem. You're able to go ahead and fix the strategy. Next slide. Talked a little bit about this. We are working through that pilot right now. I think it's going to be working. Next slide. Crime prediction. My goal with crime prediction, I am sick and tired of someone in the news media jumping up and saying, we have crime problems in Kansas City. And again, everyone nods sagely, yes, yes we do. And this is a Kansas City Police Department problem. Bull roar. Crime is everybody's problem. If I can figure out some of the correlations between what happens in a neighborhood and where crime occurs, I might be able to figure out alternative ways to actually attack the causation of that crime. If it is a hot weather issue and I can put in a park and I get to put in one park per year, let me put the park with a pool in it in a neighborhood that desperately needs to literally cool off the kids who live there. Maybe that will have an impact on crime. If I figure out that excess water usage in a block which is exclusively inhabited by abandoned buildings, according to our city registrar, I know there might be a little recreational farming going on inside some buildings. Recreational farming leads to distribution, leads to crime. And when that leads to shootouts, we have the worst murder rate in our city in the last 5 years. That's the problem we're trying to solve. And what I'm trying to do is figure out a way to mathematize my violent crime problem so that anybody working in City Hall, from the Eco-Devo team who's working on jobs, to the Full Employment Council who's working on ways to build a pipeline of talent, to the Parks Department who's building the park, to the Water Department who's actually giving up that data and letting us understand what the nature of their problems is, I want every single city employee to realize that crime is in fact their problem too. And to stop yelling at the poor policeman who's working his butt off to try and mitigate what's happened when the rest of us have failed. And that's kind of what we're doing with this particular predictive analytics. Next slide. The ABIS thing, this is a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun for multiple reasons. The first of which is we didn't have to pay for any of the dev work. Yeah, that's true. ABIS actually came to us because, like many corporations, they are trying to deal with the digital world just as much as we are. And in fact, in many cases, your private sector partners, many of you who are here today, have a greater stake in what happens with technology adoption than the government does. Because the one thing I guarantee you will still exist 10 years from now is the city of Kansas City city government. We will still be here. One thing I cannot guarantee will still be here, the people who service Betamax machines. I think I have the last one in Kansas City. We inherited it, it's true. But the bottom line is, private sector has to embrace this technology because their customers are embracing it at a faster rate than governments are. And what we know about ABIS customers is most of them are business travelers. They lack local knowledge about an area. They show up, they are here for 4 days, they disappear. And what ABIS wants to do is to make that experience as much as possible a cell phone based experience. Just like the way you get your boarding pass for your airplane, just like the way you get your hotel key when you stay at some of these hotels that have the virtual key that works with your phone. ABIS figured out they can do this with cell phones. More importantly, you have 16 access points, digital access points inside a car that's manufactured today, of which maybe 2 are being used. So car manufacturers are putting additional capacity, understanding that there will be a need for it over time. So they want to use, of those 16 ports in a car, a couple of those ports to work with the city. They want to ingest all that traffic data that I'm collecting with my traffic sensors. They want to ingest site data about really cool things in Kansas City that their renters might be interested in. I know Terry was here for our Kansas City Smart City Connect conference a couple of weeks ago. And if there is an app on her phone that says, I love music, it might suggest to her when she, first of all, requests the car on her app on her phone at home, then shows up at the airport, chooses the car because the app tells her where her car is located. And if she instead wants to upgrade, she can choose that option too and move to a different spot in the parking lot. She can then flash the QR code, and that cell phone just became the car key. And oh, by the way, now that electric ignition works as soon as your cell phone is in the same proximity as the car. So guess what? No one's going to steal your car because that kills the starter switch. Oh, by the way, you're having a wonderful time. You're not familiar with the community. You forgot where your car is parked. The app knows. We'll take you right to it. Oh, by the way, once you jump into that car has been talking to your telephone. They're having sort of this little electronic courtship kind of a thing going on. And your car now has all the knowledge about you that your phone does. And if Mark Zuckerberg taught us anything yesterday, it's that, yeah, your phone knows an awful lot about you. That's okay if all you've got on there are things like, I love music. And now the car tells you, while you're not driving, by the way, because they can kill that functionality, while you're stopped at a stoplight, hey, I see you like music. You know, the American Jazz Museum is 4 miles that way. You can go look at Ella Fitzgerald's dress on a mannequin, and you can hear her music on a set of earphones, and you can experience what someone experienced in the Kansas City Club in the 1930s right down the street. And if you're like Vasu and you had 9 music apps on there, it will tell you not to park in the 1 hour parking spot. Go ahead and park behind because you're going to be there for 2 hours. And allow you to experience that and enjoy your Kansas City experience your way. Because if you're exclusively a music lover and you show up in Kansas City and talk to me, because my kids are more cultured than I am, I will take you to the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum, and I will take you to my favorite barbecue spot, and you will look at me and say, Kansas City might be the boringest place on planet Earth. When the fact of the matter was, that which actually tickled your fancy is less than 50 meters down the road. This allows that car to be part of that solution. We're testing it in August, when I've got 12,000 friends coming to Kansas City from the Veterans of Foreign Wars International Convention. An individual's conference agenda will actually be built into the car. And because there are 12,000 people there, and I don't have restaurant space in my convention center for 12,000 people to eat simultaneously, there will be probably 50 different dinners going on 3 different nights, because each of the state delegations for the VFW have little state dinners. It's what they do. Now, this car will tell me exactly where to go, what time to leave from my hotel, the whole 9 yards. If I go through the Avis app, and oh, by the way, Avis makes money on the deal, because Avis is offering a deal, a 25% discount, I think it is, to conference attendees who say, yes, I'll be in your test. Which means that they're making a profit by significantly increasing the number of Avis cars that are rented to this particular convention. It's all about that public-private partnership, and they get to figure out how to revolutionize the rental car industry. We get all the data as to where their cars are located, and at the end of the day, our system works better for both parties. And that's kind of how this thing happened. And they came to us because we've got the traffic data, and we were willing to share it with them. Next slide. Everything we're doing in Kansas City is all about partnerships. We know that nothing that we're doing is feasible without bringing other people into the game. The biggest thing that has to happen to move from being a community of today, which is kind of cool, to being a community of tomorrow, which is smart, is you have to change the mindset inside your city governments and your county governments. And you have to say to yourself, the city doesn't control anything anymore. It is impossible for the city of Kansas City to dictate to citizens or to dictate to businesses what is going to happen. Not only is that undemocratic, it doesn't sound very fun. The fact of the matter is, we need to partner with Cisco and Sprint because they had enough money to put in a smart city corridor. We had to partner with a little company called Exact, which was a Kansas City startup. They were the ones who created our smart city data analytics platform. It was 2 dudes working out of the one guy's dining room table when we found them. And he said, yeah, I'm kind of this guy who wants to use data to fight crime and I haven't found a place to do it yet. I said, dude, welcome aboard. I need you to figure out how to predict potholes. He said, that sounds like the least fun thing I've ever done. I'm like, I know. Someday we'll fight crime, but right now I need an ROI, so go find out how to predict potholes. As of today, he now is working in 6 different cities. He has 12 different private sector partners. He has 22 employees. He pulled up stakes from Kansas City, moved to Chicago, and now if I want to talk to him, I have to get on an airplane to go visit. The good news is he's also a Cub fan, so we hang out in the bleachers, and that's where we have our meetings. Awesome. Yeah, how about that? So that's kind of the way this thing works. Cisco didn't have the data system, which was innovative enough to do what we wanted to do. And because Chris was from Kansas City, he knew our problems. He knew the way my mayor thought. He knew the way my mayor talked. He knew the way that our city sometimes doesn't work. We have probably 30 different communities inside our city limits. Outside our city limits, I've got 7 counties, 2 states, 127 different municipal entities, many of whom are willing to fight each other at the drop of a hat. It's a lot of fun. It's a very complex environment. He got that. But Cisco, which is its own bureaucratic organization, did not. But by partnering with a little guy like Exact, the big and the little guys were able to collaborate, and we figured out a solution which allowed us to answer our people problem questions using a tech solution that could only be manufactured at an industrial big company level, and then actually shared that with people because the government was involved. So it took that level of multi-city, multi-party relationships. And the other relationships, quite frankly, that are critical for us right now is the multi-governmental organizations and relationships that we have. We are part of something called the GCTC, the Global Cities Team Challenge, which is managed by the federal government. They're the people that invented the red stoplight. Very small little thing. Once upon a time in, I think it was Columbus, Ohio, there was a single functioning stoplight, and it was the first of its kind. And when the light was red, you were cleared to go across the road. When the light was off, you had to stop. Shortly thereafter, someone put in a different light in a different community, which had 2 colors on it. And that was where your green and your red came from, and green meant go and red meant stop. When people from Columbus went to this other community, they got confused. And so what happened was the federal government finally said, we have to figure out how to standardize this so everyone plays by the same rules. Well, the GCTC is that federal government entity that's trying to do that for smart cities data. And so we're a member of that, as is San Diego, as is New York. Membership opportunities are free of charge. The federal government wants your input. And oh, by the way, they are working at the speed of the federal government, which means that you got time to join. We have a lovely event every October in DC, it's great. But we actually do share and we talk at those things. And more importantly, at the city level, we're innovating probably 10 times as fast as they are at the federal level. And Dr. Sanklu Ri, who runs that program for GCTC in the Department of Commerce, likes that. Because we are failing every single day. And every time we do, we figure out what actually works. And because I'm failing in Kansas City, that is a lesson that when I share with New York, only impacts the 487,000 Kansas Cityans instead of the 16 million New Yorkers. That's a win. When we do something that works in one community, we can then share that success, and all of a sudden little companies like Exact become big companies. Little innovations like, I don't know, smart cars or connected vehicles or autonomous vehicles actually flourish and grow and become an economic driver because it works in one place, and once it's validated, everybody else will follow. You will very rarely find a bureaucrat in a city or county government who jumps up and says, I want to be the first at everything. Because the next thing you read is their resignation statement. It's just kind of the way it works. Everybody wants to be second. By doing this thing at the GCTC level and having a multi-city relationship, each of us can be good and be first in one thing. And we assume that risk and that dev cost one time. But we benefit from everybody else's lessons learned. And that's how we're making this thing work. Another group that's working right now is a place called Venture Smarter. It's based out of Cincinnati, Ohio. When Zach Kuhn, who is this venture capitalist, figured out that it was no longer cool to be the Cincinnati smart city guy. Because he realized that half of the people who work in Cincinnati live in Kentucky and cross a really big bridge to go to work every morning. Which means half of the income that he was trying to leverage to put in smart city technologies didn't exist in his city. Half of the impact that he was hoping to make was not relevant to people that work in his city every day. And the biggest problem that he was having to face was how to get people from one side of the river to the other side of the river every single morning by 8:30 a.m. so they could actually make their living. So it was a regional transport problem that he was facing. It was not a smart city problem. So he started a smart regions movement. And to this day, he's now got 25 regions that he's looking for, not cities, that he wants to fund things in to figure out if they will work at a regional level. And this is another one of those things that's open today, it's open now, and he's just looking for people who are willing to be first in one thing. And by joining his little club, you get the benefit of 24 other things that other people are trying to be first at. And if we are half as successful as our partners in the private industry who work out of accelerators and smart city or startups and that sort of community, yeah, there's probably about half of us who will fail miserably. But that's okay if we're only failing at one thing, but we get the benefit of 22 others that might have succeeded. So it ends up working in the end. It's also the only way we can do this. The third thing we've done is we have our little innovation partnership program in Kansas City. It's where we invite our startup community to come prove their products in our city government. So for 3 months every year, just after the mayor's State of the City address, we open this thing up. And we say to our startup community, bring us solutions to a problem that we've identified, or bring us your own problem. And if you've got a problem that you think you can solve with your technology, I need you to come to City Hall and prove it. And we will link you up with one of our city departments. We will go through the permitting process. We will go through all of the things that have to get done for that technology to actually work in our community. And then we'll play with it for a little while, 30, 60, 90 days, depending on how long it took us to do that planning then. And at the end of those 90 days, we give them a chance to stand up in front of a room that's actually probably about this size at Tech Week. And the first day of Tech Week, it's kind of a light appearance in terms of numbers of people. But the people that show up on the first day of Tech Week while everybody else is flying in are usually the venture capitalists. They're usually some of the folks who will be speaking later, so they're doing their pre-checks of all their PowerPoint slides and whatever else have you, or they're city reps. And so the mayor starts things off and says, welcome to Tech Week. Welcome to the 200 of you who are here first. Good on you. Awesome. We've actually got something for you content-wise on day one, which for a typical Tech Week conference is a kind of a cool thing because it doesn't usually happen. And then I roll these startup leaders out, and they each get 10 minutes. And they give their pitch about what their company did during that pilot period, which again cost the city $0 to try this thing. And then they get to get hit by questions from the crowd, just like a Shark Tank thing. And at the end of the day, the city manager comes up and says, this was all awesome. Oh, by the way, we've had 15 people participate in this program. 7 of them now have city contracts. There's only 1 that's gone out of business. The rest have got contracts with other cities, and we've served as that item on the resume which says this technology works, and we embrace it, and we endorse it, which gives them employers, or gives them jobs. It gives them a chance to continue that startup journey and hopefully grow. And this is the way we're able to actually now partner with all those kids in high school that you guys would look at and say to yourself, I have no idea what that kid's doing, but it's really cool. Now we're actually able to say, not only is what you're doing cool, we want it in City Hall, we want it in our community. Go crazy and do something awesome. And this is a way for us to do that. This is how any place in the United States today, now, can be a smart city. It requires 0 actual investment at this time. If you can get control of your data, which, yes, incredibly difficult. In Kansas City alone, we got about 4,200 data sets. I have a chief data officer whose life is a never-ending struggle against standardization, data normalization, API establishment, API maintenance, trying to figure out why it is that Bob Bennett didn't show up for work this morning, and the one thing I need is the thing that's in the 12th block of his Excel spreadsheet, and if he didn't show up, the entire system is going to break. So he calls me and yells at me. That's Eric's world. He's a nice guy, and I hate that I do that to him. But getting your data under control is absolutely positively something that if you are able to do it, you'll already be there. 80% of the data in all of our predictive algorithms that we have as a city already exists, and it's already being collected by a bunch of dedicated city employees and county employees and federal employees who are just doing their job every single day. The thing is, in a lot of cases, they're so focused on their little lane, they don't realize that it would be good for the public works guy to tell the water department when we're going to rip up the street. They don't realize it would be a good thing to let the Parks Department know that the water main that we just put in doesn't support the 12 fountains that you've designed in your great master water design for this new park that you've put in. So once you sort of break that paradigm and get your data under control to where everybody can understand where they impact other departments, you change the nature of the way your government works. Focus on people problems. Technology for technology's sake isn't just boring. It's incredibly inefficient. It doesn't do anything for you. If you focus on how do I make my street budget work further or work better, now all of a sudden I'm coming up with technology solutions that solve a problem that I can actually point to an ROI. If the problem I'm trying to solve today is diabetes, because right now on the eastern side of Kansas City, there are 3 zip codes where your life expectancy is 13 years less than a zip code less than 2 miles away. And the biggest cause of death there is heart failure, and there is a direct correlation between the heart failure sufferers and diabetes sufferers in that same zip code. If I can come up with opportunities to intervene early and start to combat that disease now, I might actually increase the lives of about 37% of our 487,000 people by 13 years. And it's not an insignificant thing. But I need to use data to do that, and I got to focus on that problem, not the problem of wouldn't it be cool to have an air quality sensor. Maybe an air quality sensor is a part of that solution. Maybe it's not. Because the last thing is, bring in twice the number of usual suspects. We had no idea how to solve the digital inclusion strategy when we just laid out all of that connectivity information on a map. It was cool. We thought it was informative, but it wasn't until a woman who is sort of the digital evangelist, for lack of a better term, in one of our public housing units, came in and yelled at us that we realized that relevance was the bigger problem. It was not connectivity. Her deal was pretty simple. She has always been sort of the woman in charge of this building in one of our housing projects. Nobody moved in that building without her knowing about it. And if you did something wrong, she was the one that yelled at you. It was pretty simple. Her daughter moved. More importantly, her daughter took her granddaughter with her and moved to Chicago. And now, the woman who ran this building with an iron fist did not get to see her granddaughter every day. And there wasn't a lot of money there for her to jump on the Amtrak and just go back and forth to Chicago on a weekly basis to see this kid as much as she wanted to see this kid. And so she went to one of our little digital town halls that we do on about a weekly basis from different companies. And she said, what's this Facebook thing? I've heard about it. I want to know how to use it so I can see my kid grow up. So then she became a Facebook user. And it was her that showed up in the building one day and said, you guys don't get the problem. I need everybody in my building to have Facebook so we can figure out what our family's doing someplace else. That's the driver. So yeah, did Mark Zuckerberg screw up? Yes, he did. But let me tell you what, it was because of Mark Zuckerberg that I had a building in one of my housing units that embraced digitalization. I now have kids in that building who know how to look for a job because they think the internet is relevant to them. They're building profiles on LinkedIn. They're actually searching for and applying for work on a device that was kind of a paperweight and was not worth the investment of paying for that connectivity until this woman got pissed off because she couldn't see her granddaughter. So that's the thing. You got to bring in people who have not been solving that problem before to kind of help you figure out where the opportunities are. Then do the math, figure out what the problem looks like using a bunch of variables, and then go find your sensor. If you only have to buy 12 air quality sensors to get enough information to help solve your asthma problem, then you only have to buy 12. If you go out and just say, I'm going to solve asthma with technology, I'll do exactly what Louisville did. I need to buy 1,000 sensors because Louisville did it with 500. We'll call it good, we'll be better. No, you didn't need that many, dude. You only needed about 12 because air quality looks like this, blah, 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 blah. And you figure out how to procure the stuff you need, not just the stuff that sounds cool. Technology for technology's sake is worthless. And then finally, think in the long term. We probably got about 20 years to get this right. I have 16-year-old twins. They're nice people. I would like for them to still find my house a relevant place to visit 20 years from now. It would be even cooler if when they have children, I could maybe just jump in the car and go see them without having to make it, a baton death march. To do that, I have to make sure that the city in which they live gives them a chance to jump onto a cell phone and pay their water bill. or has a car that allows them to park wherever they want to park, and not worried about if they've got 3 quarters in their pocket to each meter, but that cell phone talks to the meter itself, which may not even look like a meter, it may just be something embedded in the street light, and they get a monthly bill. And oh, by the way, if they park in a certain region because they work for a certain employer, maybe they get it taken directly out of their paycheck, or maybe they get a better rate because they work for that employer, and that employer's cut a deal with the city. Because yes, we will cut deals with anybody. Dirty secret. We're all family now. I can tell you the dirty secret. So that's kind of the way this thing is going to go. They expect that their world will be connected to them. And if anything, in the recent past has taught us this, these kids are going to do amazing things. I mean, my son and my daughter, who are now 16, are now proud survivors of their first good, solid school detention for walking out of class a couple of weeks ago. They literally changed the conversation in my community. And oh, by the way, 20 years from now, they're going to have the economic ability to go wherever they want to go that's connected. So we can build that connected city, or we can start and prepare to travel a lot, because that's where our kids are going to be. So we have a choice to adopt or die. I choose to adopt. I think all of us in this room, anyway, have chosen to adopt, or we wouldn't be here in the first place. And the other thing is, I think you guys have got some amazing foundations here in McLean County. I am incredibly jealous of your system of using the high school to come up with an associate's degree. We're stealing that. And I'm going to be sending people from Kansas City here to figure out how to replicate it with 2 high schools in my inner city, because that thing's going to work. I'm going to tie it to our economic development guys, and we're going to start implementing what you guys have figured out how to do, because it's brilliant. Some of the partnerships that you have the opportunity to build here, because you've got a state farm, which is, a world leader in some of the things that you're doing, and you've got autonomous vehicle production that's happening in this community. You can literally write the book on how to insure autonomous vehicles, something that only about 3 billion people on planet Earth are going to be concerned about, and you can start that revolution right here. You don't have to go anywhere. All those tools exist right here. And oh, by the way, you produce 27,000 people a year graduating with advanced degrees that can do that work for you. And you don't have to import them as talent. All you got to do is throw them at a problem and let them go off and do great things. You've got multiple communities who are focused on different sets of the problem. If each community solves a problem and then leverages what the other people are doing on the other problems, you can literally subdivide this thing out and figure out who's going to attack which portion of it. You're going to be doing 8 things while other communities are doing 1. And you guys are in an incredible, incredible, incredible position. And that's why I want to make sure that I'm a partner with you now, before everybody else figures out how awesome you are and rushes in and try to take my spot. And I look forward to that. And I think we're going to do some literally generational, transformational, freak show, awesome, somebody get the Hollywood dudes to write the script now, because it's going to be a great story. And the better news is that 20 years from now, no one will care, because we will have achieved something that is going to completely set the foundation for folks when they take the next step. And we'll be able to sit our butts on a beach someplace, drink ourselves a Mai Tai, and say, you know what, we were there at the beginning, and it was cool. And hopefully we did right by those generations who are following us. And with that, I think I am about 2 minutes behind, so I only have 12 minutes for questions. So you want me to run around and play Phil Donahue? I can do that.
Questions?
The question was, what have we discovered that's not quantifiable? Willpower. And I will tell you right now, that is one of the things that I'm struggling most with. We are at a really fun time in Kansas City right now, where we have had 7 years of an incredibly talented mayor who has this vision thing down. And he is allied with a city manager who also shares the same vision. And the really neat thing about these two gentlemen is they both understand what the other's role is, and they're comfortable sort of letting the other person do what they do best. My mayor is incredibly weak administratively. If a dog walked in, sat on his little computer keyboard, he could not compel the dog catcher to come in and remove said dog. That would be wrong. He would have to go ask the city manager to please allocate animal control to come over and do that for him. And then it would all happen. There's exactly 12 people in city government the mayor can tell what to do, and that's his personal staff. But he knows that, and quite frankly, he could teach Teddy Roosevelt how to manipulate the bully pulpit. So, awesome. He's all about the vision thing, but the city manager came out of the city budgeting office. He literally knows where every dime has come from Kansas City for the better part of the last 14 years. And so in terms of how to operationalize this stuff, he is the master at that. And we're able to overcome bureaucratic hurdles that mere mortals are unable to do. It's awesome. But we're losing both of those guys here in about 54 weeks. And I myself will be unemployed in 52 weeks. At least from that case, I'll find something. So I've got to figure out a way to sort of assess the willpower of the 9 people who want to be mayor next to carry forward these programs in Kansas City. And in lieu of that, I'm trying to figure out a way to put irreversible momentum behind the program so that willpower will be forced upon them, whether they want it or not. I don't know if we're going to get there, because 52 weeks is a very short time in a governmental stance. And there are some folks there who are anti-technology, and I am concerned that that willpower exists in the community. Also, similarly, good example of this, we failed massively in 2016. We participated in the DOT Smart City Challenge. Yay! We were semifinalists. Awesome! Columbus won. Aw. And when that happened, all these plans we had for digitizing another street in our community and doing lots of advanced things beyond our phase 1 project, because it required money, there was no willpower to do that. And so I have spent the better part of the last 48 months trying to figure out a way to fund that. And again, it's a question of willpower. Are we willing to place that as the priority over others? And that's, I can't quantify that. That is literally a face-to-face, heart-to-heart. We have to move beyond the anecdotes. We have to use data to help us make that argument. But someone's actually got to raise their hand at the city council meeting and say, yes, I agree to fund. And there has to be about probably 1,000 people behind that city council member saying, if you don't raise your hand, you're fired. And that's the willpower we got to get to. Yeah, let's see here. Let's see if I can match the technology here. I just broke it. All right, cool. Right about there is our Kansas City Living Lab. That is where we make all that data available. And so today now, I have given Kansas City Power and Light, which is our utility, access to all that data. And I don't know exactly how they use it, but because it's publicly available data, I can't even ask that question necessarily and expect that they have to give me an answer. We partner with them on some R&D work. They have advanced metering infrastructure, which we're trying to leverage to do some sensor work, because much of Kansas City actually looks like the very southern reaches of McLean County. You pass the sign that says, welcome to McLean County, before you even get to Bloomington-Normal. So we have big chunks of municipality of Kansas City that have more cows than people, and I cannot justify to my corporate partners putting Wi-Fi down there. Sprint will never do that. There's a zero business case. But, funny thing, the farmer who lives there expects that when he flips the switch, he has electricity. And so Kansas City Power and Light is out there. And they are putting in AMI because it makes more sense for them from a business sense to accurately reflect what's happening in terms of usage, and also to figure out on the co-use side, or the reverse flow electricity side, because a lot of these folks have got solar on their roofs and a couple of wind generators out there as well. So they're selling some of their stuff back. So they've already got the AMI in place. When I collaborate with them, I put a sensor up there, and in exchange for that, I give them essentially the keys to every API that I've got for data. The partnership is not as strong as I would ideally like, because we're not in a co-planning phase yet, but I hope we're going to get there. We have given them a seat on our Smart City Advisory Board, so they know everything we're going to do before we do it. They just haven't shared that back with us because, number one, they're in the middle of a massive merger effort right now with the utilities in the eastern Kansas space. They're trying to close 3 coal-fired plants and replace them with wind generation, which is a huge CapEx for them. So they've got some other issues they're dealing with, but I hope it's going to improve. Certainly, the conversations are happening, and we're making the data available. We just got to improve that a little bit, and EEI is actually helping us with that.
City council changes, what kind of public support do you have for these sorts of innovative initiatives? There's, here in Bloomington-Normal and McLean County, there's a very vocal, very active, very engaged part of the electorate that sort of drives our agenda and makes their concerns known. And then when you look at voter turnout rates, that doesn't necessarily seem to be carried through to the whole community. So my question is, do you know what your voter turnout rates are? And if they're really good, how do we improve them here?
Our voter turnout rates are horrendously low. We just had a citywide election for a 1 cent sales tax, which for the last 20 years, and it was a renewal of a 20-year sales tax, has paid for simple, meaningless things like the bridge that connects North and South Kansas City. Other small items like the school district support that the city provides, and the money that's available to each council member in the Divide by 6 fund, as we lovingly call it. I think it's called Public Infrastructure and Action something fund. But we call it the Divide by 6 fund because all this 1 cent sales tax dumps in one spot. They divide that number by 6, and the council members, and there's one elected from each district and one at large representing that district, then you get to spend 1/6 of that with a board from their own district on projects in that district. So it's a great little fund. Has made a tremendous impact on the lives of citizens because it's, yes, here's a problem, city council member X has money to solve said problem, and off we go. About 9% election turnout at that election. Yeah, horrendous. The last big election we had was our airport election. We actually had a private sector partner come to us wanting to fund our entire airport. We had to do a P3 with them to do it, but because we were going to hold the bond, we had to go to the voters for it. And we ended up with about a 37% election turnout rate, and that's the best we've had since the 2011 mayoral election. So we've got a problem there. The other problem is a lot of our citizens, I abhor the term smart city. There's about 200 some odd of us in this room. That means there's about 400 some odd definitions for that term. There is zero actual true definition for that term. And because of that, if I go into a startup room full of startup entrepreneurs and say we're going to do smart cities, in their minds, that means that their technologies got added to the stack. In my city manager's mind, it's like, which of those technologies do we actually need? And is that the optimal solution, or is there something else we got to RFP this out? So yeah, it's the people that know what they know what they want when they see it. So when the streetcar finally got done, after 18 months of blasting the mayor's office and crushing everybody for ruining Main Street and ripping up the street and causing drama, on the day after the streetcar was done, everyone said, "Oh, this is the best thing we've ever had." Do you remember the last 18 months when you were just destroying us and every platform available to you? That was great. A little bit of support then would have been nice. So no, we struggle with that mightily. I try to help mitigate that a little bit by dragging people from City Hall out of the building once a month. On the even months, I drag them off to a coffee shop in the morning. On the odd months, I drag them off to a bar in the afternoon. And we have a very public forum in a very public venue. And usually it's one council member, maybe 2 or 3 departments I'm working with on specific projects. And I talk about sort of how these departments are smartifying themselves. I maybe get 60 people there. And again, there's 487,000 Kansas Cityans. So it's not, it is a very small, it is the problem you're describing. It's a very small, sometimes vocal, but not usually group. And when something works, nobody notices. And when it fails, then I hear a lot about it. And then when it fails and we fix the problem, and we come up with something completely different, which transforms a system, which did happen with our transportation network. We had a paratrans option that we were innovating on that we played with, failed spectacularly. On a Thursday, the company went out of business, disappeared. None of the buses existed. I had probably 600 people stranded all over town. And I knew I was having a bad morning when at 4 o'clock in the morning, my phone was blowing up. And I'm like, what the hell happened? Look at the screen and it's like, oh, wow, my paratrans company just disappeared overnight. And we had to figure out how to fix that. What we came up with was a partnership with the ATA and with our taxi company. And it actually now provides a service which is almost Uber level of responsiveness for a population that desperately needed it. Well, as soon as that started working, there was no parade. Nobody noticed. Everyone said, oh yeah, that's a great service. We've always had it, right? No. No, we didn't. But thanks. So I wish I could give you a good news answer, but there isn't good news there.
Okay, thank you for being here, and thank you for your service on behalf of the whole room. You know, both of those things are extremely beneficial to us, so thank you.
Thank you.
Real quick question, because I know we're up against time. So everybody has a mentor, right? In a lot of ways, to McLean County, Kansas City now is a mentor in terms of what you guys are doing and what you brought to us today. So you talked a lot about the potential here. Who do you guys look up to other cities, either through the MCTC or other countries who now have declared not smart cities, but smart countries are the way of the future?
Miguel Gamino and the city of New York are absolutely one of our mentors. The thing that Miguel has done and that Mayor Bloomberg started with his data-centric governing policies, but also what now Mayor de Blasio has continued with net neutrality, is absolutely inspiring, because New York was the first one to start talking about digital equity. Not digital equality, but actual digital equity. And so we are trying to embrace that and carry on some of the things that he's doing. We look to San Diego from a sustainable perspective, because they're doing some amazing work. They have more solar on their roofs than any other community in North America right now. And just really fun stuff that they're doing in terms of how to bridge the gap between utilities and the city itself. I look to South Bend, Indiana as the kings and queens of water management. Their EPA consent decree that they had to do because their water dumps into Lake Michigan was almost debilitating from a city budget perspective. A little itty bitty town that doesn't get to draw taxes from Notre Dame, because Notre Dame as an educational institution is tax exempt. So therefore their number one employer and their number one thing in their community was not necessarily able to add direct value to the city budget itself. Awesome. You're dumping water into Lake Michigan. Cool. Therefore your bill is $4.2 billion. Yeah. They started using data. They started using one of their little startup companies that actually came out of the Notre Dame School of Engineering called MNet. And they have now renegotiated their consent decree with the EPA to bring it down to $1.6 billion. And so we were like, dude, I want to be you. So we hired his company, we brought those guys down to Kansas City, and we're using them. Santi Garces is their CIO. The man is a genius. And he gets how this stuff works. And again, it's a collaborative. But those are 3 cities that we absolutely lean on. And Barcelona, Spain, of course, for the Wi-Fi bit.
Thank you, Bob.
Thanks, guys. No, thank you. This has been so much fun.
Thank you, appreciate it.